All right, so Hilltopper family, welcome to our nutrition webinar. Ellie Kempton is going to speak today. She is a former Hilltopper, swam with us all through high school, broke many Colorado state records, represented us at Olympic trials in 2008, and went on to swim at University of Virginia and has had a lengthy experience in the sport of swimming and in the world of nutrition. She is going to talk you through some changes in lifestyle, and I'm gonna let her take over from here. Okay?
Thanks, Sean. I'm so happy to be here, and it is so gratifying to be able to give back to DU Hilltoppers, having been one myself for a really long time. And now that I don't compete as a swimmer, it's such a treat to come back to a group of swimmers and share what I train in now, which has everything to do with food. And truthfully, I say this all the time to swimmers that I work with, I wouldn't be doing what I do now if it weren't for all the structure and the strength that was given to me as a swimmer. It's a really rigorous sport. So before we dive in, I really want to share my story because I think stories are really powerful, and especially origin stories. And I think my story really sets the tone for our time together today because I fully empathize with everyone listening and what they've experienced and what they're out for. So as many of you already know, my story really did begin in a pool. I was an avid little competitor since the day I was born. My mom had to remind me all the time not to compete with my siblings and friends on every single thing in life. So needless to say, swimming was the perfect sport for me because you literally compete all year round and it never quits, as you all know. My dad was my very first coach, and then I, of course, joined the Hilltoppers and swam for UVA. But here's the deal. Sean can attest to this for sure. I had no idea what moderation meant. It was always all or nothing for me. So I pushed my body like it was a machine, and I expected it to be a machine. And it was in my second year of college that this machine started to break down. And I wasn't very good at listening to it, so I didn't. And I also had a very high pain tolerance, as many of you do. I know all the athletes listening have a very high pain tolerance. So I figured pain was not a big deal. In fact, I thought it was maybe a good thing. I was pushing my body. But then it became a problem. And pretty soon my swimming began to suffer. My mood definitely suffered. And most importantly, I wasn't happy. And I was what you call a very grumpy swimmer. So I finally swallowed my ego just a little bit, and I started to pursue answers of what was going on. I went from physician to physician, and the answer I found was pretty harsh. And it turns out that for a while, actually, I was dealing with a form of autoimmunity, Crohn's. And so here I was in this beautiful Charlottesville, Virginia, with access to the most incredible medical resources. But what I was put on, I wasn't really comfortable with it. It didn't really resonate with me. So I had to start looking for even alternative strategies. And this was my personality too. I didn't really settle. And so what I ended up finding was a functional doctor. And essentially functional medicine is just a little bit different in that it's more holistic in its approach. And it often explores the root cause of clinical symptoms of pain. So this functional doctor, she sat me down and she asked me really strange questions like, how do you sleep at night? And how do you manage your stress? Or maybe, do you manage your stress? And my answer was obviously no. And then she got really wacky and started asking me like what I eat every day. And she started to ask more detailed questions about food that I had never been asked, because up until this point, I had only ever seen UVA's dietitian. And truthfully, I loathed it because I felt like it was just a bunch of numbers and it was ranges, and I wasn't quite sure what to eat or when or how to do it right. And so inevitably, I vowed I'd never become a dietitian, but we'll get to that. So back to this doctor, she was all sorts of weird, and she was the weird in the right kind of way. It was kind of intriguing to me. It was new, and it was really unlike anything I'd experienced because her approach made sense to me. She was also a biochemist, and at the time I was studying biochemistry, and so she started to speak my language. And so even though I was really stubborn and I was really slow to trust, eventually I did. And when she started having me eat food that was alive in a really consistent way, I started to feel alive again. It was a really neat transition, and I'll never forget it. It really changed my life and it saved my life, but it also really hooked me onto what I do now. So I started listening to my body as soon as I started working with her, and I really started to understand what it was telling me, but more importantly, I started giving it information it understands. And I'm going to tattoo this on your brain by the end of our time together, but food is a form of information. And when we give our body information it understands in timing that it understands, which is what I'm going to start teaching you tonight, these really special cogs start clicking into gear. And that's what I want you to experience. So that experience that I had back in college was really transformational. And of course, remember, I don't do anything in moderation. So I went straight from Virginia out to Seattle, and I got my master's degree in functional nutrition. And then I did go on to become a dietitian because I really love the marriage between clinical medicine and a functional approach. So I really like to put those two together. And in order to do that, I wanted to become a clinical dietitian so that I had access to the cutting edge research and science that my clients deserve, but served on a platter of more functional approach. So as a functional dietitian, I'm here now in Denver, of course, and I specialize in hormone balance, and I work exclusively in private practice, predominantly with women and athletes and family. And it's my dream job because I get to see incredible things happen when the athletes under my care or the women under my care experience, again, this marriage between the clinical approach and the functional approach. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. My purpose is to come in and teach you a very simple way to experience what I experienced, and I'll just teach you the beginnings of it, of what to start doing. And then as a family, because I know there's moms listening and there's dads listening, and as a family, you are your team now, and you're going to be a team committed to this, because I'm sure you're feeling this pressure right now with this time away from swimming to do something and to take advantage of it. And it's so neat. I felt so honored when Sean reached out earlier this week to ask if I could do this, because I felt like I got to play a really special role in you taking advantage of this time. And not only is nutrition your most competitive edge, it's also going to be your best protection with this immune challenge that we're experiencing as well. So you get to kill two birds with one stone. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump into a little 4-step plan. I like to categorize things. You'll notice this about me right away. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And you're going to see a workbook that you will get access to, I think, on Monday. I've broken it apart into pieces, but you will get all of this. And the best thing you can do as you're listening is grab a piece of paper and write down what speaks to you the most, because at the very end, we're going to give you a little quiz. And it's supposed to be fun, but I do want to stitch everything together once you've listened to it. And the 4-step approach that we're going to work through is going to help you take notes, because it's going to compartmentalize everything so that you can learn it more easily and you can teach it. And that's a really important piece too. As soon as you learn this, it's important to teach it to someone else, because chances are they are going to benefit from it too. And when you teach something, you also learn it. So we're going to walk our way through fueling, upgrading, self-care, and some liquids, all under the acronym of FUEL. And we're going to start with the F. And this has everything to do with what I like to call filling your functional food roster. And I'm a total dork. I do alliterations all the time. Somehow it makes me more trustworthy, but I just love alliterations because they help you remember it a little bit. So let's look at our food roster. And again, I'm a huge dork, but I want you to see this through the lens of playfulness. Instead of making it a sterile, fact-driven seminar, I want you to really see this with artist's perspective. So your team roster is 4 different groups. You've got your vegetables, your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. And the reason I call them a team is because they do different things in the body and they play a much different role. So we're gonna walk our way through them, and then I'm gonna teach you how they all fit together. But you'll notice that I don't lean very hard on numbers because the body is not a calculator, it's a thermostat. And that's a really important thing. I want you to remember that. And that's something that really changed the way I teach nutrition, is understanding the impact that certain foods have on the body in increasing the thermostat of your body. So we're not going to treat your body like a thermostat or a calculator. Remember, your body is not a machine. And so we want to give it fuel it understands and information it understands. So we're going to start with vegetables. And as a dietitian, you would have expected I would have started with vegetables. But I'm going to teach you a different approach to vegetables that will help you understand the role they play. And for you as an athlete, vegetables are going to help you unlock all the vitamins and minerals and all of the fuel that's in all the other foods. So think of it, vegetables like the lock and key. And every time you have vegetables on your plate, you make the most of the other foods on the plate. So it's kind of like your natural enzyme that opens up the fuel of all the other foods. When it's couched like that, they're a little bit more attractive. But I'm not going to give you numbers to lean on. I'm going to let you use your hand. So I want you to hold your hand up, and you can see this cute little illustration I have. And everyone's fist is a different size. So my fist is a different size than Sean's fist. Sean's fist is different size than Cece's fist. And that's a really good place to be, is because your fist is proportional to your body. And so the goal would be to try to get 1 to 2 fists per meal, because again, that's what unlocks the nutrients of your other foods. They aren't in and of themselves energizing, but they help the other foods be more energizing to you. So because these are teams, I have team cards. So this is the vegetable team card, and this will all be given to you. I put little cut lines for you on these so you can actually cut your team cards out, because I know you'll want to. And here's your team roster. I highlighted mushrooms, and here's why. I'm doing a ton of research on what's most immune protective right now, and I couldn't help myself but share this with you, in that mushrooms are really, really protective to the immune system. And if you're squirming in your seat right now because you hate mushrooms, that's okay. But I wanted to point out that that might be one of the vegetables you pull in more often right now to also protect your immune system right now. But I want you to take a look at this list, and you'll notice that root vegetables like potatoes and squash are not on this list because they're going to be in our carb list. These vegetables don't have quite as many carbohydrates, but they have more of the vitamins and the minerals and the enzymes. So again, they are the lock and key. And with every little food card I have for you, I have a cute little recipe at the bottom. So I'm not going to spend much time on the food cards because they're just meant to be a little gift for you to play around with what foods are, you know, make up this macronutrient, but also some easy ways to have them on the run. So let's transition into protein. And protein is truly the building block of the body. So when you think about muscle, protein is going to be a really, really important piece to the puzzle. And I know as a swimmer, I really never ate enough protein. I'd throw like walnuts on something and call it protein. And that was very detrimental to my body's capacity to rebuild itself. So I want you to think about protein like this heartbeat to your day, where it's just consistent and it's just reliable, and your body can depend on you giving it protein every 3 to 4 hours is a really good rule of thumb. As far as how much though, I know again, we've got so many different age ranges listening. So I want you to use your hand. And if you weren't athletes, I'd say the palm of your hand would be sufficient, but you all are super active athletes. So it's really the entire hand that you need. I do have numbers up here because that doesn't work for everything. Like yogurt is a really good protein, but it's really hard to judge the palm of or your hand with yogurt. It just doesn't work. So that would be a time to look at the back of the package and say, how much yogurt is necessary to hit this range that I have here, this 20 to 30 grams. And I'm saying 20 to 30 grams per meal or snack. So when you snack on protein, aim for that 20 to 30 grams, and that's going to be a really good baseline for you. So we've got a team protein playing card here. And if we look at the roster, there's lots of foods that add up to or that contribute to protein. And as you're looking at the list, you might notice that nuts and seeds are not on this list, nor is cheese. And that's because those have more fat in them. And so I really contribute, or I count the foods that are more protein rich in this group and the ones that are more fat rich in the fat group. And you'll see that coming up. Here's some really fun little proteins on the run, because I'm sure you're sitting here thinking, okay, if I'm going to eat that much protein, or if I'm going to eat protein that consistently, it's nice to have some little snackable protein ideas. And these truly are some of my favorites that are stockable, and especially since it's becoming unpredictable as to what you can find at the store, this list might help you out a little bit. And then I've got a really fun little protein pudding for you guys. This is something that I teach the athletes under my care often, because it's something that really settles well and is a great pre-afternoon practice fuel. So now that you have a different training schedule, I'm sure that you have either a morning or an afternoon, or maybe both workouts, and this would be good midday. It just settles really well, and it's packed with protein. So we're going to go into third team player here, carbs. And carbs are the most energizing macronutrient. They energize the body the most quickly, but it's a short burst of energy. It's not a long burst of energy. That's fat, and we'll get to fat in a second. Carbohydrates can give your body up to 2 hours of fuel, because carbohydrates are stored in the muscle and the liver, but they are used up really quickly. And so they're an awesome source of fuel. And especially when I'm working with athletes like you who are training at least every day, if not twice a day, carbohydrates play a huge role in training, because you need access to that really quick energy. The problem with carbs, and we're going to spend some time on this, is that carbs tend to be the macronutrient, the food group, that gets combined with sources of sugar more often. And sugar is not going to serve you for as long as a complex carb coming from a whole food. And many of you already know that, but it's good to see different ways to escape that. So we're going to spend a chunk of our time today on what I call upgrading your carbs. Instead of labeling it as like a good carb and a bad carb, I just want you to upgrade your carbs. And I'm going to show you a whole list on how to do that so you don't have to guess. But let's look at the amount here. Again, we're going to go back to your fist, because I don't want you to have to remember which hand gesture to do. So fist of vegetables, fist of carbs. And this is going to be per meal or snack, 1 to 2 fists. And it's nice to be able to look down and say, am I actually getting that? Not to be limited by that, but am I actually getting that much? And so if you have really young ones in the family who are, in the age of 2 to 5, their little baby fists are going to be so indicative of how much they need versus your bigger athletes in the family who maybe need a lot more. If you need this number range, though, the 40 to 60 grams is going to be really good. And it's good to do an audit on yourself, because your fist might not actually get you to that 40 to 60 grams, in which case you maybe need to augment a little bit. So your team player card here has probably the most fun recipe, I'll say. So if you're going to print out any team player card, I would print this one, because it's a lemon mug cake. And what you'll notice is I use chickpea flour. And here's why. When you're an athlete, I think it's really important to lean more often on legumes. Legumes being garbanzo beans and lentils, more often than you would not being an athlete, because lentils and legumes have both carb and protein. And remember how I said as an athlete, it's really hard to get enough protein. Legumes kind of do that 1-2 punch for you. So you'll notice up here that both in the team carb list, as well as the team protein list, beans, lentils, and legumes are on both lists. You've got grains here, quinoa. Resistant starches is a more advanced concept, but I'll just quickly say one resistant starch is a greener banana because it breaks down a little more slowly in your gut. With athletes, I lean on resistant starches often because they are a longer burning source of carb. But you're more than welcome to research resistant starches. I love using them with my athletes, but start with a green tip banana. It's kind of a fun trick. Root vegetables, fruit, and winter squash. So I know I'm going through these cards a little more quickly because I want you to playfully print them out and put them to work, but mostly I want to get to the punchline, which is how everything fits together, and we're about to get there. So let's jump into fat, which is actually my favorite of the four. It's the longest burning source of energy, and my promise to every athlete working under my care is that they will become what's called a fat adapted athlete. This is a really important concept because what it speaks to is your body's capacity to swing from using carbs to swinging to using fats really seamlessly and interchangeably. I work with quite a few cycling teams right now, and that's a big, big concept. And I see cyclists and swimmers as being very similar in that you're training for really long periods of time and you're pushing your body to go past the point of carb storage. And so being able to use fat as energy and then being able to use carbs as energy, that is going to be the most powerful form of a competitive edge right there. So just as I said, fat really does, it provides the body with long-term energy. So not just 2 hours, it gives up to 20 hours of energy. And so it's important to include fat, and the way that I measure that, just to estimate the consistency, because remember, your body's a thermostat, so you want to give it consistent fuel to keep the thermostat high, is what you can hold in your hand. And so this would be like half an avocado or a whole avocado, because it'd be 2 halves, or a big handful of nuts, or cheese fits into this category. So let's look at the list here. You've got a lot of different options that contribute to fat. I mean, even certain meats contribute, but the things listed here are the ones that have almost exclusive fat contribution. And then as far as ways to capitalize on this, because it might feel kind of overwhelming to try to get that much per plate, you can play around with things like this. I always give my little athletes like energy bites, or I call this a fat bomb. I'm actually giving everyone in this group my energy bite recipe, which is very similar to these fat bombs. And essentially it's just really, really good fat mixed together with either dates or almond flour to hold it together. Here are some fun fats on the run. Again, I try to tee you up with shortcuts because my job is not to give you more to think about, but actually less to think about so that you have just easy, accessible things to reach for. So if you have all 4 of these macro cards side by side, you could go to the grocery store and just load up on a few of each. And that would be a really good way to just begin the process of understanding how to stitch these foods together. But let's look at this as a whole plate. And so I like you to visualize this because you typically eat on a plate or a bowl, and it's simpler than you might think. I'm not actually a huge fan of the My Plate. I don't really abide by that, but I do think it's important to see visually how you can stitch these different hand diagrams together. And you'll notice that the palm of the whole circumference of your hand definitely would take up at least 1/4 of your plate. So you definitely want to make sure that's there. If you had 2 handfuls of fat, that would take up 1/4 of your plate. And then it's kind of dependent on how many vegetables you're willing to eat as to how much the vegetable portion takes up. So I drew this line here to indicate if vegetables don't fill up 1/4 of the plate, fill the rest of it with carbs. And that's a really important thing to remember. This is a really static way of eating. This is the way I teach eating at first. And then as you're ready to move on, I like to teach which of these 4 food groups to emphasize at different times of the day, but first start here, because this is a really, really good place to start. So as you sit down to dinner tonight, consider just looking at your plate and just categorizing a little bit. It's good for your brain to categorize food because now you're starting to understand what each food does. And yes, I'm going to quiz you on each of the different 4 foods and what they do. So hope you were taking notes. All right, so we'll come back to this, but I want this to lay the foundation for the next concept, which is you, and this is upgrade your carbs. And upgrading your carbs is not taking carbs away. If I were a swimmer listening to that, I would think, oh, maybe she means eating less carbs. And that is not what I mean. I mean taking carbs that you eat that fill at least quarter of your plate, at least, and upgrading them, because remember, food is a form of information and we want to give your body information it understands. So here are some really simple ways to think about upgrading. And it takes a food that's maybe has more ingredients listed in it, and it swaps it for a carbohydrate that has fewer ingredients listed. So here's just some simple ones. Like if you're used to eating cereal, one upgrade would be to go to, say, a nut-based granola. And a nut-based granola has fewer ingredients, and it actually swaps a carb to a fat, but it also is just a form of information that is so accessible to your body. I go through a few different ones, but I want to showcase one here that is my new favorite. I literally am probably the only one who is, during this crisis, stocking up on Banza pasta, but I have stocked up on it, and you can too now. Banza pasta is made out of garbanzo beans. And if you remember back to what I said, garbanzo beans and lentils are a 1-2 punch. They are both carbs and fats. And that's really important because as you remember back to the plate, you need kind of equal portions of those two. So what better way to get that? And so when you get your Banza pasta and you consume it, just notice for me how much longer you stay full, and notice how much more energy you get from it. Because pasta is amazing, but I want you to get as much energy from that pasta as possible. If you get really wacky crazy and want to combine your pasta with some vegetables, you'll get even more energy from it because you'll have that lock-in key to unlocking the energy in the carbs and the protein. Another upgrade here is going to be some simple ones here. Candy to fruit, muffins, just your traditional kind of, I don't know, packaged muffin to an oat flour muffin. And I have a whole repertoire of oat flour muffins that I'm giving you guys. I have a lemon chia seed one, a cinnamon, carrot cake, chocolate. I have a whole packet of muffins for you guys that are my favorite. I'm not a swimmer, I'm a swammer, but I still do stay active, and I use these all the time. I love them. They're a perfect afternoon snack. As some of the athletes, the swimmers working with me now can attest to, they're just a perfect training table fuel. And then another one that I'm giving you guys, and I already told you about this, if you are prone to using cookies as a form of fuel, you can upgrade to energy bites. And I use these as fuel for summits. I think it's a perfect fuel for between races because it's just small and it's a really big punch of energy. But it's also a really good thing if you're craving sugar and you want something that's going to give you tons of energy, but also be a form of fuel that your body understands. So this list might look a little long to take in right now, but that's why it's yours. So this is going to be in your workbook. It already is. And you can take this list to the store and maybe play around with some of the upgrades because they are fun to play around with if you let it be a game. Oh, here's a visual of my muffins. So my recipes are very simple. They're very functional. You can tell my brain is like, it's very compartmentalized like a waffle. And so everything is very streamlined, but I'm giving you guys 4 different variations off of this muffin. And you can see it's just functional fuel, oats, protein powder of choice. I use collagen just because it's so good for building bone and muscle. I do use in this one, this is not me being a dietitian, these are fluffier muffins if you use egg whites. I've tried them so many times with regular eggs and they just never rise. So if you use egg whites, they're very, very fluffy and delicious. And then here's that resistant starch, that green tipped banana. That's why I put that in there, because that green tipped banana is going to break down slower in your body and give you more consistent fuel. And if you guys have questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer. I'm sure that's a question that's going to come up in our Q&A. Okay. So we're on to E, and this is all about emphasizing self-care and sleep. And this is where you're going to see me as a functional dietitian, because I'd be doing you a huge disservice to say that the way you live doesn't matter, only what you eat. The two are inextricably linked. And so it's really important throughout the day to see your stress levels ebb and flow. This is a performance tool for your body to be able to be challenged, but also come back to a place of safety and rest. The body performs best if your stress levels look like this throughout the day. So this might be your practice, and then you come back, and what do you do to rest and digest? It could be, I don't know, time reading a book, or it could be a nap, whatever it may be that takes you from that challenge back down to a place of safety is unbelievably important, because the body thrives when stress levels undulate like this. And when stress levels don't undulate like this and stay up here, you're more prone to getting sick, and you're more prone to a less powerful or less quick recovery, because this undulation of stress levels enables your body to recover. And that's a really, really big deal. That's the difference between you and your competitor, is you allowing your body to recover. So if you're sitting here thinking, I have no idea what she's talking about, I don't know what I would do to bring my body down to this place of rest and digest, I have a list for you. And I love being spoon-fed lists. So in order, I forgot a little arrow here, but in order to go from this place of stress to just peace and balance, there are some simple things you can do. Like, what would it look like if you started stretching during this time away from swimming? Or what if you even just had water every morning when you woke up? We're going to talk about fluid here in a second, but drinking water really consistently is a really, really good way to support the body. The numbers of hours of sleep you get is a huge piece of that stress curve, keeping the stress really low at the end of the day. And then there's something to be said about just consistent meal timing. It's really, I don't know, it's really easy in this time of less structure to just kind of eat any time of the day. But when you eat really consistently and you try to fill the plate in that consistent way that I just taught you, that's a form of safety to the body, and it helps the body recover more quickly. So I want you to think really creatively, and I want you to talk about it as a family of what can you do to make sure that throughout the day your level of stress undulates, just like in butterfly. I want you to see that pattern, and I want you to end on a level of low stress, because that's going to put you into sleep that's more restful and that's going to recover you much more quickly. All right, the L of the equation is liquid. And here's the deal with liquid. I often see liquid and hydration being done all wrong in the world of sports medicine, because it's not a matter of more is better. In my world, it's a matter of functional is better. So let's start with how much to have. And the best way to judge that is making sure that you're drinking enough to pee 6 times a day. That's a really important piece. That question gets asked all the time. I wish I made a nickel for the number of times I was asked how many glasses of water I should drink a day. And it kind of doesn't, that number doesn't matter, what you excrete matters. And so keep tabs on that. And it kind of doesn't matter what color your pee is, because you could have had something really high in B vitamins. Like if you ate a bunch of broccoli one day, you might have really fluorescent pee. And that doesn't tell me you're hydrated or not. So it's the number of times throughout the day, and keeping tabs on that is really important to make sure that you are really well hydrated. Another thing to think about, and this is something that I was never taught as an athlete and I wish I were, is that it's really important to have your electrolytes before big bouts of activity. Because what electrolytes do is they charge the cell and they allow your body to accept water. And that's a really cool thing, because that means when you drink water, you make the most of it. So I skipped over liquid earlier, but I do have a little diagram for this. And essentially, liquid is the driver to all chemical reactions in the body. And so it's kind of like the other bookend. If vegetables are on one side, liquid's on the other, and they make sure that your protein, carbs, and fats work. So let's look at ways to make your liquid functional. You can absolutely drink water. Water's great, but I love to give athletes under my care some ideas to make liquid pretty functional. So you have kind of you kill two birds with one stone. And so here's some functional ways to think about it. Let's say you have a lot of belly bloat. This used to always happen when I got really nervous before big meets. One way to address that is to add a little bit of lemon or lime to your water. And what that does is it helps your body secrete more digestive enzymes, and it helps decrease that belly bloat. Stress is another big one. Right now, it's really stressful. And if you felt like your stress curve was up here as I drew, it might be important to drink some tea. Tea is a really, really functional way of drinking hydration. And one of my favorites, and those of you who have worked with me are going to laugh because you must think I just can't get enough of this. But one of my favorites is called Tulsi Tea. And Tulsi is an herb that's very safe. In fact, it's used in the world of sports medicine often. I just finished a sports medicine conference late last year, and there was a Tulsi Tea rep there, because what it does is it moderates and decreases levels of cortisol. And you perform well when you have some cortisol, but not too much. And so Tulsi is just this lovely tasting tea. And you can do it cold, you can do it hot. It's a great one. If you're new to tea, give it a chance. It might be something you really like. Another one for inflammation is a drink called golden milk. And golden milk is something that might be really good at the end of the day, especially if you want something kind of like hot chocolate. And so here's a picture of golden milk. And golden milk is, the base to it is turmeric. So with some of the athletes I'm working with right now, their levels of inflammation are a little bit higher. They're experiencing cramps or they're experiencing slow recovery. And so instead of just putting them on a bunch of supplements or changing the way they eat drastically, I use this form of functional medicine called turmeric. And turmeric is a root. And this drink is really sweet. It's good. It stains everything, so don't spill it on your counter, but it's delicious, and it might be your form of decreasing inflammation so that the next morning you wake up and your muscles aren't quite as sore, especially after some of those harder sets. And right now, when you're doing different types of workouts, I know I'm about to do Sean's resistance training protocol, and I'm going to be drinking golden milk because I'm going to be really sore. I haven't done resistance training in a while. So golden milk is a great way to do that, and you are being hydrated along the way. You don't have to hydrate on top of that. Another one I want to point out is coconut water. Coconut water is a form of electrolyte. I don't really love the flavor of coconut water. I think it's tough. But if you combine it with something like lime or lemon, which also helps with that belly bloat, that's kind of a cool way to go about it. And I love showcasing that for athletes who are maybe coming from the world of just straight Powerade and looking for something a little bit different. And some other ones that I mentioned here are good too, Ultima or Noon. But remember, it's important to think about having your electrolytes before a workout. That's going to allow your body to accept the hydration more readily. So you can look at some of the others. I don't want to get too carried away. This is like my love language right now, is talking about functional medicine and what it does. But I think it's nice for you to have this little chart to see some very approachable ways to experience this food as medicine and giving your body information it understands to do what it does best. And that's what's so fun about my job, is seeing that happen in real life, and having experienced it myself, it's pretty magical. So I just want to give you, I want to go back through and I want to highlight some key things, and then I want to quiz you because I want you to really retain some of this. And again, like I said, opening this up, I really do want you to teach this to someone else, because I know when I come into my client sessions, I am teaching one person, but I'm typically working with families. And in doing that, I know I'm teaching so many others. So just as a recap, we've got these 4 food groups. And something that I want to mention, and I'm realizing I didn't, is that vegetables are actually a form of carbohydrate. But remember, I don't really like following rules. And so I made up my own a little bit, in the sense that I separated vegetables and put a little halo on them and said, these are so special that I want to have them as their own category. So if you were listening to a sports medicine lecture, you would only hear protein, carbs, and fats. But I've made vegetables its own thing because I want it to be very clear to you how important they are. So you've got these 4 food groups, and they each do very, very different things in the body. The vegetables are the lock and key. The protein rebuilds the muscle. The carb is the really short burst of energy, and then the fat is the much longer burst of energy that you can rely on for hours at a time. And it's important that all 4 get some spot on the plate. And the best way to judge that is with your hand. At first, you can look at the numbers. All of these numbers are going to be in your workbook. So if you're wondering what to go back to when you look at a label, you'll have these diagrams in your workbook. The other thing that's really, really important is that when you have carbs, you upgrade them as often as possible. And an upgraded carb is one that has fewer ingredients on the label, meaning your body understands that information much more quickly. And you want to think about it through the lens of really swapping one of your favorite foods for another one of your favorite foods. I don't want this to be torture. I want it to be pasta for pasta. Something that really brings you joy, because carbs are awesome and they play a huge role in your plate. So make it be fun. So playfully, maybe make my muffins or my energy bites, maybe go to the store and see what's left in the cracker aisle. And I think you'll laugh, because the upgrades here are usually the things people are not stocking up on right now. So it's all yours, and that's great. And then the self-care piece. I want you as a family, and if for sure you as a swimmer, to sit down and make a list at some point this week, or this weekend, since it's Friday, of all the different things that you can do to bring yourself back down here. Is it music? Is it tea? Is it napping? Is it reading, journaling? What is it? And for sure, what can you do to put yourself into a space of deep rest? Because sleep is the most powerful free tool you have. There's nothing that I could give you to replicate sleep, but it's free. So it's an awesome tool. And then the last piece is just to play around with your liquid. Make sure you're peeing 6 times a day, at least, and make it functional. Playfully make it functional. All right, Sean, do you feel like they're ready for a quiz?
I think they are.
Okay. I tried to give them, you know, the benefit of the doubt. Okay. It looks like you're going to actually have to share the quiz I made.
I got it.
Okay.
All right, folks. This is Coach Smith learning technology at his very, very, very best. You should see a poll coming up on your screen right now.
I see it. You did a great job. I'm going to take my own quiz just to throw the stats off. Oh, it's not letting me.
I think I can take it.
Okay, take it.
Oh, Lucky Charms. Those are good.
Oh my gosh, I had a ball putting this together. I was laughing.
And for those of you watching at home, it turns out that some of you could see me and some of you could see Ellie. I apologize to all of you that just looked at me for 30 minutes. Ellie is much more animated,
Aww.
a lot more effective and definitely easier on the eyes than I am. My wife told me I was stretching at some point during the meeting.
Shoot, we'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, well, I think most people saw you, Ellie, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure why. There might be some people laughing right now, though.
Okay, there's 8 questions, so maybe another minute or 2.
Yeah, I can see the responses coming in.
How are they doing?
We're about mid-20s and going up pretty quick.
Okay.
Fruit by the foot, that's a trick question.
I just put all my favorite foods on here. You know that.
Sure.
Remember how obsessed I was with goldfish crackers?
Oh, yeah. Ellie was eating goldfish at Olympic trials.
Definitely.
Just
In my
so
goldfish
you know,
cracker
that's
snack
That's a
pack.
true story.
It
She
is
had
a
the
true story.
Yeah, the little thing that you could reach inside, but they didn't spill out.
It was my security blanket. It really was.
Yeah.
It is such a surprise that I'm now a dietitian. Crazy.
All right, we're going to take about 30 more seconds. I see we're getting pretty close to the number of participants, so just a couple seconds here.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I think we're going to end the polling. Get your last votes in. And then I think we can take a look at the results.
Yeah. Only you can see. Oh, yeah, I can see it too now. Good. Okay, so I'll go through the results really quickly. Number 1 is actually all 4 groups, A, B, C, and D, are the team food roster. They're what are called macronutrients, and as you know, they do different things. Vegetables unlock the nutrients in the other groups, and it's supposed to be the other 3, not the other 4 groups. Protein, you guys all got that right, is the building block to the muscle. Carbs quickly energize the body. Good job. That was 92% of you got that. Fats are the longest burning fuel source of energy. And an example carb upgrade is swapping candy for fruit. Yep, that was a great one. Sleep and self-care, that is true. They're just as important as your workouts. And then coconut water is an example of a functional fluid because it's both hydrating and it has electrolyte properties. Great. Awesome. You've got a smart crew. I like them.
Awesome. So this is where my foray into technology may crater, but I'm going to do my best. We're going to go into a Q&A, which I think I have to moderate. So if you have questions for Ellie, now is the time. I'm going to open this up, and if anybody has questions, I don't know how it comes through, actually. Do they have to type it in on a chat question?
Yeah, you can either raise your hand,
okay.
Or chat. I saw one come in. Oh yeah, chat is great. But yeah, either way. And an anonymous attendee asked me if I swam in the actual Olympics, and I did not. No.
Okay.
Okay, another person asked, does peanut butter count as protein or fat or carbs? That's a really good question. So peanut butter is a nut, and so I count it. You'll see if you look at the back of a package of peanuts or peanut butter that it's mostly fat, and so we count it as a fat. It's, you know, if you're as A-type as I am, it's a little annoying to say, oh, but there's also some protein and there's maybe a little bit of carb, especially if sugar is added, but it's mostly fat. So we put it in the category that it counts the most toward. Do you want to read the question? Can you see the questions?
I can see the questions.
Okay, why don't you ask them to me?
Okay. How should breakfast, lunches, and dinners be balanced?
Great. So timing wise, you want to make sure your meals are no longer than 4 hours apart. And ideally there's a snack or two put in there, especially if you're trying to keep muscle on. It'd be really important to pop a few protein snacks in between there. But as far as balance in terms of how much of everything, I'm just going to go back to this real quick. And this plate is the way I want you thinking about balance. This makes it look so simple because I'm assuming all your food is separate, and it's not always. You have burritos, you have smoothies, but think about the ingredients you put into those, and that would be a good way to make sure you're still striking this balance.
Okay, I can answer a question. Will you send us these pages? Yes, the handouts will be distributed. We've got some stuff coming up on the chat as well. Is whole wheat flour okay as opposed to almond flour?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
What do you eat before a race? Be specific.
Well, that kind of depends on what you're used to, in the sense that if you're used to eating Rice Krispie treats, I don't want to just take you to the other side of the spectrum and have you eating like a fat bomb. So I have to answer that based on who I'm sitting across from. But I typically recommend a 2-to-1 ratio of fat to carb. And here's why. When you are practicing this higher fat approach, because that plate I showed you I'm more on this side of a fat fueled athlete. I told you guys that I really kind of specialize in making athletes fat adapted. When you start eating that way, then your body expects that. And so it's only after you've started eating that plate model that I taught you that a 2-to-1 ratio of fat to carb would be a really good thing. And the energy bites you guys are going to get on Monday is an example of that. So you could try that on for size, but don't try anything new on race day. If you're like me, you just want to try something new on your biggest race. I did that all the time. And it never worked out well. So practice it all the time. Like maybe on your Saturday harder practices, practice having the energy bites before and see how you feel. See how your energy is towards the end of the practice. And then you can fine tune it from there.
All right, I got another one. What is the difference between trans and saturated fat when you're reading a label?
Well, trans is, it's interesting. Trans fat is actually no longer allowed to be put into products. So that's going to go away on labels. But trans fat is basically a more modified form of fat that is not as clean burning as saturated fat, believe it or not. Saturated fat, if it's coming from a really high quality source of food, like I think beef is a really good form of saturated fat, that is going to be much more clean burning than trans fat. So you want to decrease your intake of trans fat. It's not as clean burning.
Okay, what vegan foods are great for a swim meet?
Ooh. Well, let's go back to this food that I keep talking about all the time, which is legumes. I think roasted chickpeas are awesome for my vegan athletes. One of the cycling teams I'm working with right now it's a vegan cycling team, and it's really challenging me because I'm having to be super creative with all my vegan training table foods. It's a work in progress, but one of the things that they do really, really well on are roasted chickpeas. Because they just settle really well and they have a lot of salt, which is electrolytes. Another thing for vegan for some meats are rice cakes. So you take white rice that's been cooled and you make it into a pocket filled with peanut butter and maybe some jelly. And that's a really good protein and fat combo that's vegan. I'm trying to think of some other simple ones. I mean, the energy bites are vegan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we change our diet slowly or all at once?
Slowly. Yeah, you're not going to love how you feel if you just do this in a dramatic way. So when I'm working with clients one-on-one, we pick it apart. Like I teach the big picture, but then we take it one meal at a time. And that's a really important approach. And I know most swimmers tend towards the place, like, remember, I don't do anything in moderation. So I just want to do it like yesterday. I would take it one meal at a time and overhaul one meal and then the next and the next. And then you'll notice the difference and not be, you won't feel defeated if it doesn't feel good right away. Because sometimes when you make changes, your body has to adjust a little bit. And that's good to let it adjust. So do it more slowly and you'll see a positive difference for sure.
Are fruits beneficial, or should they only be eaten in place of sweets?
Oh, fruits are awesome. Yeah, no, I just showcase them as a carb upgrade just because I thought it was fitting. Like if you go from, a Jolly Rancher to blueberries, that seemed like a good swap. But across the board, they don't just have to be candy upgrades. They are such a valuable source of fuel. And if you look at the colors within fruit, colors are a form of medicine in that they're really they protect you against inflammation. They're what are called phytonutrients. They fight inflammation. And so the more different colors you eat in fruit, the better too. So think about that, diversifying it, making sure you're having blues and the reds and the oranges and the greens. Do all of the colors.
Okay. These are great questions, by the way. I'm working my way through them as quick as I can.
Yeah.
Is there a certain place that you recommend getting the drinks that you suggested, the Tulsi Tea or the golden milk?
Yeah, so it's funny how more cautious I am now about saying Amazon because you'll get it like next year. I would recommend, one of my favorite shops in Denver is Natural Grocers. And I just like them because their selection is it's smaller, so it's not overwhelming. And they for sure have Tulsi and golden milk. That's like their bread and butter. So yeah, that would be a great place. Or Sprouts, Whole Foods for sure. And then I don't know about the Kroger's. I haven't looked for these specific things there, but Amazon then if you're willing to wait.
College athlete question. How can college athletes adapt to this, given that many times they do not necessarily get to choose their meals or have time to prepare their meals?
Yeah. So this is something that I work with college athletes on a lot because it is hard when you just are given in the dining halls what you're given, and it requires a little bit of playfulness and a little bit of creativity to stitch together things that maybe don't innately match. Because I know at UVA they had very specific dining hall for athletes, and they would just plate things together. And so had I known this, which I wish I did, I think I would have been a different athlete. I would have gone from a different section where a plate was put together and maybe added certain things from another plate that was pre-plated to make sure that I had all 4 quadrants filled. So it does take a little bit of creativity, and you might just have to match foods that wouldn't typically match in other settings and be okay with it. Because the nice thing about being in college is that all the foods are already made for you. It's just a matter of you taking a needle and thread and stitching them together really creatively. And that's something I'm more than happy to help with if that feels really overwhelming.
What and how soon and how often should you eat right after a workout?
So there's some conflicting science on this, and I'm not convinced that you have to eat within 30 minutes. That's just a little bit of 80 science there for you. But I think it is important to not go longer than an hour. So my favorite thing, if you're leaving practice or maybe right now you're finishing up your big resistance HIIT training session, I would make sure you have a drink on hand that has some form of protein in it. And I'm not talking those kind of like synthetic protein drinks. I'm talking something really simple, like what would it be like to have your favorite one of those drinks listed on the functional food list, and you throw some collagen powder in there. That's one of my favorite drinks for athletes because collagen powder doesn't taste like anything. It's tasteless. It really is. And then having that on hand opens your window up a little bit, because if you have that within the first hour of having finished your workout, then you have time to prep and plan or go out and get the rest of the food that fills the rest of the plate.
Since we were told that fruits and vegetables were generally in the same food group, can we substitute one for the other, or just keep the vegetable component and replace with carbs as needed?
That's so good. I'm so glad you asked that, because you're right. They used to just be interchangeable. Like, are you eating your fruits and vegetables? So here's the deal. You must, as you're filling your plate, make sure that the carb section is at least a quarter, if not more, and then anything else on that other half of the plate. So let me illustrate this better with this. Okay. So make sure that, where's my pen? Oh, there it is. Okay, make sure that at least this much of your plate is carbs. Don't let vegetables infringe on that, because remember, vegetables aren't super energizing. They're just the lock and key. And carbs are at least that, if not more, and then the vegetables fill in the rest, so that you don't infringe on your carbs. Because I know that it's easy when half your plate, or if half your plate were just vegetables, it would be so easy to fill up on that and not get the energy you need. And you wouldn't fill your muscles and your liver back up with glucose. So just make sure at least a quarter of your plate, if not more, is carbohydrate, and then fill in more with the remainder with vegetables.
Can we eat before we go to bed? What foods should we avoid, if any, at that time of night?
So evening food definitely needs to be a little bit lighter in nature, because at night your digestion shuts down a little bit. And so it's important not to feed it fuel that takes a lot of work to unravel and break apart. And so my favorite fuels before bed are carbs and proteins combined. So one of my favorite things, I work with runners and I call it a runner's cobbler, is I will do warmed berries on a skillet and sprinkle that with granola, and then put that in some yogurt. And that's a really good evening snack.
Awesome. I got this in a couple places. Can you review other proteins that replace meats?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So there are lots of different high quality proteins that replace meat. Number one, pea protein is a really, really good one. So there's a company that I think is pretty clean right now that does really good protein substitutes that's pea-based, pea plant protein based, and it's called Beyond Meat. Have you seen that stuff, Sean?
I haven't.
It's really good. I like it. It's
There's some kids in my group that are laughing right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's great. Another one that I think is really good is tempeh, because it's fermented soy, because I don't like soy for young women. Again, my bread and butter, I love the science of hormone balance. And when you bring in a ton of soy, you can alter estrogen levels. And so my favorite form of soy is tempeh, because it's fermented soy. So the estrogen content, the phytoestrogen content is lower, and it tastes really good because you can crumble it like meat, or you can cube it. I eat tempeh a lot. It's really satisfying, and it looks weird. Like, it doesn't look glamorous in a package, but it pan fries really well, and it's a good substitute, especially if the rest of your family's eating meat and you want something that you can substitute in really seamlessly. And then I don't know, I'm a really big fan of using things that again leverage those lentils and those legumes. So like lentil pasta is a really great fuel for you. Black bean pasta, chickpea pasta, those are all awesome. If you make a soup instead of meat, you can put lentils in there. And those are just such clean burning fuels. Like, I'm unbelievably impressed with the cycling team I'm consulting for right now, because they're trusting the fact that I'm not gonna make them all bloated with all these lentils and legumes, and it's quite the opposite. The food is settling really, really well, and they're doing incredible with more legumes in their diet.
Awesome. I've got a couple of questions along the same line. What would you recommend to eliminate pre-race and meet stress, and or like dealing with nervousness at competitions?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back, and this is why I'm so glad we talked a little bit about the emphasize self-care and stress relief and sleep, because what you practice in your day-to-day is your practice for the meet. So your stress reduction plan starts way before the meet happens. And what I want you doing in preparation is practicing things that you can lean on the day of the meet, but you've practiced them so much that it's a no-brainer. So one example for you that I know I started practicing in college, it was actually a sports psychologist who came and talked to our team about it, and it just really struck a chord, is he said, you know, when you're feeling nervous throughout the day for anything else, it could be a test you're about to take or just a challenging scenario, just feel your feet on the ground. Just feel them and come out of your head into your body. Because I always was a very cerebral athlete, as Sean knows. I just overthought everything. It was like paralysis by analysis. And so he just had us come back into our bodies and just feel our feet on the ground. Or he said, if you're sitting behind the blocks, just feel your butt on that seat and just sit there and center your energy there. Because when you're in your head, that is where cortisol just takes flight, because you're thinking through the race and you're completely about to swim the race, not by feel, but by thinking it through. And so if you practice that, then it won't feel so hard on race day because it's safe to your body. Your body's already experienced that. So I would start with something like that, but I would also make sure you have other tools. Like, is it music therapy? Is it aromatherapy? What are the other things you're practicing every day that you can do on race day and your body clicks into gear like, oh, that's my safe place. That's my happy place.
Let's see. So I got a couple of, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. A couple yeah. If you were a fish, what fish would you be?
Oh my gosh, I was not prepared for this. I don't know, Sean. I'm gonna put that back to you, because at one point when you watched my butterfly, you said I was a flying fruit bat. So
man,
what fish would you say I should be? I'll just throw that one back at you.
Next question, please. If you
a beautiful, colorful one.
What? Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about like these flying fish that I saw in Maui, but I'm not sure if that's that's you. But those are pretty cool. What was your favorite stroke?
Well, I only actually swam one stroke, so I wouldn't say it was my favorite or not. Some days I loved it and some days I hated it, but I pretty much only swam breaststroke. Sean, was there not a point that my breaststroke was faster than my freestyle?
I don't know about your freestyle, but you certainly outsplit your backstroke regularly in an IM with your breaststroke.
Yeah.
So that's
right. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to go with breaststroke.
I got one that I think, I don't know that a lot of athletes deal with, but I definitely think at competition, what should you do if you're not hungry?
Yeah, adrenaline. It's a hunger suppressant for sure. And so when you know your body needs fuel and you physically just are not hungry, it's super important to drink what you need. And that's why I said in that hour post-workout, you probably don't feel hungry yet until the wolves hit. And so, or you might, but the point is to get something in within that hour. Just like a meat, I think it would be really important to have a drinkable source of fuel. So one recommendation I would have would actually be, I can show you guys a form of fuel that I've found to be really good for race day for a variety of different sports. Have you guys heard of the Rebel drinks? Let me pull it up. It's just a really good balance of different of the different groups, and it's drinkable fuel that'll settle really well. Oh, there's a pop-up. So this might be something to take with you to a summit if you're feeling like that your hunger is suppressed at every meet. But it also might then be something to look upstream. This is, again, the functional approach of like, how can we work on that adrenaline to the place where you're so balanced and grounded at a summit that you can actually stomach food? That would be the next step to take. But start here with the Rebel drink lineup. Some of them have more protein than others, and that's going to be individualized based on what you can tolerate. This does not replicate a meal by any stretch of the imagination, but between your race meet meals, this would be good for on the pool deck.
I think we're getting close to the end, but there's a couple more good ones. What is a good way to establish a timeline for eating meals and snacks?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I said before, which is making sure that no more than 4 hours passes between meals. But I think it's important to schedule in your workouts and work backwards from there, because that's hard as an athlete, especially if you're working out twice a day some days, to try to get all of that in. And so I would let the 2 pillars in your day be the workouts, and then hinge the meals around that, and try your very, very best to just make sure that you haven't opened up a window of time that's 5 or 6 hours, because that's when your body starts eating into your own reserves. So, and within that, one more thing to say is that first thing upon waking, you want to make sure you're eating within an hour of waking up, because that's going to be a really important piece to start the day off. So I would put pen to paper if I were you. I know it sounds dorky and it's simple, but I do this with clients all the time. We just put pen to paper. I've got my chalkboard. We always draw it out. And if you're finding that one of those meals is kind of infringing on the next workout, I would move it back a little bit. So maybe it is only 3 hours since your last meal. So like lunch and your afternoon practice, maybe you need to eat lunch and like a robust snack 2 hours later. That might just have to be the case, which you'll notice a huge difference when you do that consistent timing, because your body will start clicking into gear and it'll start expecting that fuel. And that's a really good place to be.
I think this one, I got one that's relevant to almost everybody. Would you recommend Cliff Energy shot blocks before a race, or should I use carbs?
Well, Cliff shot blocks are carbs. So unless I'm thinking of a different fuel,
I think it's just more of a question about like eating actual food, or the shot block itself is like an acceptable product.
Yeah. So I think if you're already used to the Cliff shot blocks, they're a really good source of the carb. My encouragement would be, how can we bring in, especially if you start, being consistent about this plate model that I have for you that has more fat in it, it would be nice to think about how can you combine the Cliff shot blocks with a form of really clean fat. So a good example, like what would it look like if you had Cliff shot blocks, but then you also had maybe a bite or 2 of a nut butter packet? That'd be awesome, because you'll get the short burning fuel, but then you'll get the longer burning fuel that you can depend on later in the meet that you need the most.
I've got a couple questions about eating before morning practice, just in general. Suggestions for eating, what you're trying to do before you start swimming at 5:15 in the morning.
Wait, can you repeat that? You cut out just a little bit.
Yeah, I have a couple questions about eating before morning practice. Recommendations, what you're trying to do to get the day started before you get in the water at 5:15.
Yeah, good. So again, my recommendation stands. You want to do that carb fat combo. So I would recommend something really simple, like what would it be like to take a waffle and put some nut butter on it before that morning practice, or even half a waffle if you don't feel like you can stomach the whole. But start thinking creatively about these combinations of carbs and fats so that you get the quick burning and the long burning fuel. And so like half a banana with some nut butter on it would be awesome. Or those little puffed rice cakes that I know are super popular, and some, my favorite, actually, I love coconut butter right now. It's like my new thing. That's really good on rice cakes. And the energy bites, honestly, those would be great before your morning practice. And you can start with 2 to 3 and work your way up if you don't feel like that's enough, but those would be such great fuel for you.
What would you recommend eating if you're dealing with an injury or joint and muscle pain?
So taking time off, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, or just like dealing with like soreness or inflammation, I think.
Well, we talked a little bit about inflammation, and I recommended one thing that I think is really, really comprehensive. It's like nature's oddball, is adding in some turmeric would be awesome. But it might also be nice to start taking some Epsom salt baths, because when you're rehabbing muscle injuries, especially, or just muscle bruising or trauma from harder workouts. So like tomorrow when I'm really sore after that resistance workout, I'll be Epsom salt bathing because you need more magnesium in the muscle to allow it to repair more quickly. So that would be something to think about, either drinking magnesium, bathing in magnesium, or you can also, there are magnesium lotions or oils that you can put on the bottom of your feet. And that'll really help speed up the time of recovery.
I think I just got a couple more here. This
Really
question is, what is creatine and should we use it? But I'm gonna let you, if you wanna broaden that to supplements as a whole, feel free.
Yeah. So with all supplements, I am going to broaden it, because with all supplements, my recommendation is never to use them unless you're working with someone who's very specifically recommending them, because the industry of supplements are just not regulated and you can get yourself into so much trouble. And it's so tempting because the claims are so beautiful. Like, you stand in the supplement aisle, especially with creatine, and you look at this bottle and you're saying, oh my gosh, this is everything I need. It's the power, it's the recovery, it's the strength. But it also has some, when abused or overused, has some really tough implications on your kidney health and your hydration status. And it can break out your skin because it boosts testosterone so quickly. There are things that you just want to be under the supervision of a professional. So in my practice, I use certain things, like I sometimes use magnesium or herbs to support what I'm seeing as an imbalance, but it's really conservative because they're really powerful, and you don't want to get yourself into trouble. And it's scary. I just wrote a blog for this company that's trying to decide whether or not to put certain supplements out there. And my advice was no, really. Like, I think you can do so much. If you haven't worked on making the consistency of those 4 macronutrients be a consistent thing, go there first and you will be so pleasantly surprised. And that is really 90% of what I do, is getting athletes to there. And then we fine tune and we specialize with certain things.
What are the worst foods to eat at meets? Can you answer that?
Yeah. So the goldfish crackers, don't eat those. Yeah. So I'd say I'm going to think even bigger picture, something you've never eaten before. Like, don't go to a meet and try to perform and give your body some fuel that it's never seen before. Don't try anything new. I also think it's not fair to the body to give it information it totally doesn't understand. So when you're at meets, make sure that the food you're eating has few ingredients in it, that it's simple things. The athletes that are so, that I see just really come alive are the ones that replicate what they're doing in their daily routine at a meet. So the foods that you start using for snacks and the foods that you start using for pre-work, for your morning practice, make those your meet fuels. That is the game. And so that every day is a dress rehearsal for that big meet. That is something that I really wish I would have done. It's incredible when you do it.
What do you think about Luna bars?
I'm not a huge fan of them because of how many ingredients they have. They just, remember, it's like jumbled information, and you want these sentences of crystal clear information. So no nicks against Luna, but I think there are upgrades out there. So one of my favorite upgrades to a Luna would be a Raw Rev Glow Bar, because they are, for the vegans in the group, they're vegan. Not to say I advocate one way or the other, but I just think it's nice because they are the same, like, good, yummy texture and flavor, but just fewer ingredients and less sugar.
What's your favorite food?
It's still goldfish. I don't know. I wish Tom were here to answer that, because he sees me go through some huge jags. Like I said, I am an all or nothing person, and I go through these periods of time where it's like all that. I am really, really hooked on these chocolate chips right now that I keep them in the freezer, and they are like M&M like texture. They're called Lily's chocolate chips, and they're one of my new favorite foods right now. No, kale is not my favorite food. I know that's what you're all expecting me to say, and it's not. So.
Awesome. So folks, I want to take a minute to thank Ellie Again, she's the founder of Simply Nourished Nutrition. I think that every one of you that is still with us is pretty invested in making yourself a better athlete. And I think that you have a pretty clear idea of how nutrition can take you to the next level performance-wise. Really, a big hand of applause. We will send out the handouts. And if you have individual questions, I'm pretty sure that if you reach out to Ellie directly through the Simply Nourished website, she can probably get back to you as well. Ellie, you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I guess I just want to thank the Hilltopper community because, like I said, this is truly, you guys, my time as a swimmer is really what set me up to do big things. And so I thought really hard, and I always try to think of ways to give back. And so obviously being here tonight is one of the best ways, and I'm more than happy to do this. And I put together, Troughton and I were laughing about it because I was trying to think about what I could do as kind of a gift back. So I put together a little training token, and you guys will get this in your, I'm going to just give you guys a Dropbox folder full of everything. So for anybody who needs some extra support, some one-on-one care that enables me just making decisions for you and just telling you exactly what to do. I want everyone who, oops, I think I just went here. I want everyone who is under my care from a Hilltopper to have 20% off anything that I give you, my time, because I want to give back to the Hilltopper community. So take advantage of that if you feel like this is confusing or if it feels like it's just a little bit overwhelming, because I want nutrition to be something that truly is your upper edge and the thing that unlocks your best potential, because I see it happen every day under my care, and I love seeing that happen. So I want to give back in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Ellie.
You're welcome.
Have a wonderful weekend, folks.
You too.
All right.
Bye.